That morning, no one expected a single act of defiance to change military history. What began as routine training became a moment every soldier on base would remember, and one that would test the difference between following orders and doing what's right. The sun hung low over the Afghan village of Kalat, casting long shadows across the mud brick compounds. Dust swirled in the rotor wash of the Black Hawk as it settled onto the makeshift landing zone, its blades slowing to a rhythmic thump. Sergeant Elena Vasquez, K-9 handler with the 75th Ranger Regiment's Explosive Ordnance Detection Team, gripped the leash of her partner Rex, a wiry German shepherd with a coat the color of desert sand. At 8 years old, Rex had seen more rotations than most handlers, his ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring at the unfamiliar scents carried on the dry wind. "Team, form up!" barked Captain Harlan Reed, the platoon leader, his voice cutting through the chatter of radios and the distant call to prayer from the minaret. Reed was a lifer, broad-shouldered and precise, his fatigue starched even in the field. The unit, 12 Rangers, 2 medics, and the K-9 pair, had been tasked with a routine village stability operation. Clear the area for a humanitarian aid drop, sweep for IEDs, and liaise with local elders. No contact expected, just protocol. Elena knelt beside Rex, her gloved hand steady on his harness. "Easy, boy," she murmured, her words lost in the wind. Their bond was forged in the quiet hours of training at Fort Bragg, endless repetitions of scent detection, obedience drills under simulated fire. Rex didn't question. He trusted her signals, the subtle tug on the leash, the whispered command. In return, she read his every twitch. The low rumble in his throat meant caution. The insistent paw meant alert. It was a partnership beyond words, one that had saved her squad twice in Helmand Province. The team moved out in standard wedge formation, boots crunching over gravel paths lined with thorny acacia. Villagers watched from doorways, women in burqas, children clutching goats, elders squinting against the glare. The air smelled of baked earth and wood smoke, undercut by the faint tang of diesel from a distant convoy. Private First Class Jamal Torres, the point man, scanned rooftops with his M4, while Corporal Lena Kim, the medic, trailed with her kit slung low. "Clear left," Torres called softly into his comms. "No hostiles." Reed nodded, consulting his tablet for the SAT imagery. "Vasquez, take Rex through the central square. Standard sweep. We link up at the church in 10. The church was a local place of worship, a squat stone structure with a domed roof, repurposed over centuries from Soviet-era ruins. It stood at the village's heart, its bell tower silent. Elena acknowledged with a crisp, "Roger," leading Rex forward. He moved with purpose, nose to the ground, tail low and steady. They had trained for this. Urban environments, hidden caches, the invisible threats that turned streets into kill zones. Halfway across the square, Rex stiffened. His bark came sharp and urgent, echoing off the walls, a single insistent woof that drew every eye. Elena halted, heart rate steady despite the adrenaline spike. "Alert," she reported over the radio, her voice level. "Possible device, bearing 090. The team converged, weapons up but safeties on. Reed arrived first, peering at the church's arched entrance. "What have you got, Sergeant?" Rex strained against the leash, barking again, his focus locked on the shadowed steps leading down to what looked like a basement access. The door was weathered wood, half ajar, with no visible wires or pressure plates from the surface. Elena crouched, scanning for trip lines. "He's indicating below ground. Strong response. Could be explosives or—" She trailed off, not wanting to speculate. K-9s didn't lie, but false positives happened in cluttered environments like this. Reed's jaw tightened. "Negative on basement. Intel shows it's storage only. Grain, tools. We're on a tight timeline for the aid drop. Clear the square and move on." "But sir," Elena said, keeping her tone neutral, "Rex doesn't hit false on buried sense. Protocol calls for a full check." The captain's eyes narrowed under his helmet brim. Around them, villagers murmured, a few stepping closer. Torres shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Kim, who busied herself with a perimeter check. Reed was known for efficiency. He'd pulled heat for rushing a sweep once before. But that was stateside, not here where every delay risked escalation. "Protocol bends to mission priorities, Vasquez. We've got elders waiting at the well for the handoff. If it's nothing, we're burning daylight. Leave it." Rex barked once more, louder, his body taut as a wire. Elena felt the pull in her arm, the dog's unyielding certainty. She had followed orders her entire career, 8 years. 3 deployments, a Bronze Star for a clearance in Kandahar. But this felt different. The basement's darkness yawned like an unspoken secret, and Rex's alert wasn't just instinct, it was a plea. "Sir, permission to verify," she pressed, her voice barely above the wind. The team watched, the square holding its breath. Reed's radio crackled with Battalion HQ. "Status, Reaper 1. The captain hesitated, then shook his head. "Denied. Fall in." Elena clipped the leash shorter, but Rex resisted, planting his paws. For the first time in their partnership, doubt flickered in her chest. Not in the dog, but in the chain above her. As the team reformed, moving toward the well, the bark echoed behind them, a warning swallowed by the village's silence. By midday, the aid crates were distributed under the watchful eyes of the elders. Blankets, rice, medical supplies, standard issue, handed out with clipped instructions through the interpreter. Reed oversaw it all, his posture ramrod straight, but Elena couldn't shake the tension coiling in her gut. Rex paced at her side during the brief, his ears still perked toward the church. Debrief came swift. No incidents, perimeter secure. But as the Black Hawk spooled up for extract, a low rumble shook the ground. Not thunder, but something deeper, muffled. Dust puffed from the church's foundation, and Rex lunged, barking furiously. "Contact!" Torres yelled, dropping to a knee. Reed spun. "What the hell?" Then the scream pierced the air, faint but human, rising from the basement like a ghost from the stone. Villagers scattered, and Elena's hand flew to her sidearm. Orders shattered in that instant. The mission's routine fractured under the weight of what they'd left behind. She unclipped Rex's leash. "Go find," she commanded, and the dog bolted toward the church, vanishing into the shadows. Reed's shout followed. "Vasquez, stand down!" But she was already moving, conscience overriding the chain, into the unknown below. The dim light from the church's arched entrance filtered down the stone steps like a reluctant dawn, casting jagged shadows on the uneven walls. Elena's boots scraped against the worn treads, each step echoing in the confined space, her M4 slung low but ready. Rex bounded ahead, his nails clicking on the concrete, his bark sharp and directional, left then straight, guiding her through the musty air thick with the scent of damp earth and something metallic, acrid. Her flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing crates stacked haphazardly, rusted tools scattered like forgotten relics from the Soviet days. "Clear so far," she whispered into her radio, keeping her voice low, professional. No response came. The channel was jammed with the chaos above. Torres calling for perimeter, Kim directing villagers back. Reed's voice broke through, clipped and furious. "Vasquez, report back now. That's an order." She ignored it, focusing on Rex. The dog circled a low alcove, pawing at a loose flagstone, his whine urgent now, not aggressive. Elena knelt, her knee pads grinding into the grit, and pried at the edge with her multi-tool. The stone shifted with a groan, revealing a narrow crawl space beneath, barely wide enough for a child. Dust motes danced in her light, and there it was, the source of the rumble, a makeshift barricade of sandbags and timber, collapsed partially, pinning something or someone inside. A child's voice whimpered from the darkness, faint and pleading in Pashto. Elena's pulse quickened, but she kept her breathing steady, trained response overriding the surge of empathy. "Interpreter, this is Reaper K9, she keyed her radio. "We have possible civilians trapped. Request immediate medevac prep." Static crackled, then the interpreter's voice. "Affirmative, sounds like children. Hidden from Taliban patrols. Church used as safe house. Reads transmission overrode. Vasquez, extract immediately. You're compromising the op." "Sir, we have auditory confirmation. Trapped non-combatants. Rex indicated explosive residue earlier, but this is humanitarian, standing by for support." She didn't wait for rebuttal, signaling Rex to sit guard as she wedged her tool deeper, shoring up the unstable beam with a spare entrenching tool from her pack. The structure creaked, protesting but held. Above, the village square had erupted into controlled disorder. Captain Reed paced the perimeter, his helmet mic pressed close, coordinating with battalion. "Negative on medevac until cleared. Torres, Kim, secure the entrance. No one in or out." His face was a mask of discipline, but the tick in his jaw betrayed the storm beneath. This wasn't protocol. It was a direct challenge to his authority, and in the field that rippled like a fault line. Torres hesitated at the steps, rifle trained on the shadows. "Sir, she's got a point. That scream—" "Follow orders, Private," Reed snapped, his tone even but ironclad. Kim, ever the pragmatist, knelt nearby, unpacking her trauma kit preemptively, her eyes flicking toward the church. The villagers had formed a loose semicircle, murmuring prayers, their faces etched with a mix of fear and hope. One elder, grizzled and leaning on a staff, pointed toward the basement, his words translated haltingly. The children, hidden from the fighters. The dog knew. Rex's barks grew insistent from below, pulling Elena's attention. She crawled forward on elbows, the crawl space tight against her shoulders, the air growing stale and warm. Her light caught a glint. 3 small faces, wide-eyed and dust-streaked, huddled against the far wall. The oldest, a girl no more than 10, clutched a younger boy, their clothes torn from the collapse. No explosives, just the weight of secrecy and fear that had driven them into this forgotten corner. "Easy," Elena said softly, extending a hand, her voice calm through the barrier. "U.S. Army, we're getting you out." The children recoiled at first, but Rex's head appeared beside her, his tongue lolling in reassurance, and the girl reached out tentatively, her fingers brushing Elena's glove. Working methodically, Elena radioed coordinates for the exact breach point. "Need engineer support. Stabilize before lift." Minutes stretched like hours, the beam groaning under the strain. Sweat beaded on her forehead, mixing with the grime, but she moved with the precision of 100 drills. Brace, lever, clear debris, one handful at a time. Rex stayed vigilant, his low growl warning of any shift in the structure. Reed descended halfway, his silhouette blocking the light. "Sergeant, this ends now. Fall back." His voice carried the weight of command, but there was a fracture in it. Uncertainty, perhaps, born of the witnesses above. "Sir, 2 minutes. They're stable but pinned." Elena met his gaze without rising, her posture unyielding. The team had gathered at the entrance, Torres covering angles, Kim prepping slings. The radio hummed with HQ queries. "Reaper 1, explain deviation." The captain's response was measured. K9 alert, confirmed civilian presence, adjusting for rescue. It wasn't surrender, but adaptation, protocol bending under the glare of necessity. With a final heave, Elena freed the beam, and the children tumbled into the open space, coughing and clinging to her. Rex nuzzled the youngest, his wet nose gentle against the boy's cheek, eliciting a tentative smile. Elena scooped them up one by one, passing them to Kim's waiting arms. The medevac's rotors thrummed in the distance, a lifeline slicing through the tension. As the dust settled, Reed extended a hand, pulling Elena to her feet. No words passed, just the nod of ranks acknowledging the shift. The square fell quiet again, villagers approaching with quiet gratitude. Blankets offered, words of thanks through the interpreter. But Elena felt the undercurrent. Reports would follow, inquiries into the defiance, the delay. Her career, built on obedience, now teetered on this act of conscience. Rex leaned against her leg, his flank warm and steady, as the Black Hawk's shadow swept over the church. The mission had changed, not in objectives, but in its soul. Loyalty tested not just between handler and dog, but across the chain that bound them all. Above, the elders watched, and in their eyes, Eleanor saw the first ripple of something larger. Trust, earned in the depths, where orders met the human cost. The Black Hawk lifted off from Kalat under a sky streaked with fading light, its skids kicking up a final plume of dust that settled like a veil over the village. Elena sat strapped in the troop compartment, Rex's head resting on her boot, his breathing even after the exertion below. The children, now wrapped in mylar blankets, huddled with the medic, Kim, who monitored their vitals with quiet efficiency, her stethoscope cold against their skin. Captain Reed occupied the jump seat opposite, his gaze fixed on the horizon, the notepad in his lap untouched. No one spoke. The rotor wash filled the silence, a steady thrum that masked the undercurrent of unresolved tension. Back at Forward Operating Base Salerno, the debrief unfolded in the Tactical Operations Center, a prefab bunker humming with fluorescent lights and the low buzz of servers. Maps pinned to the walls showed grid lines over Kalat, red markers noting the church's coordinates. Colonel Marcus Hale, the battalion commander, presided from the head of the folding table, his uniform crisp despite the late hour, a steaming mug of coffee at his elbow. Flanking him were the JAG officer Major Ellis, notebook open, and a signals intel specialist tapping at a laptop, replaying drone footage of the square. "Walk me through it, Captain," Hale said, his voice gravelly from years of briefings, eyes on Reed, from the initial sweep to the deviation. Reed stood at parade rest, recounting the events with measured precision, the aid distribution, Rex's alert, the order to proceed, the subsequent collapse and screams. He described Eleanor's entry without inflection, as if narrating a weather report, the crawl space, the children, the stabilization. "Sergeant Vasquez acted on her assessment, sir. No casualties, but it delayed extract by 27 minutes. Hale nodded. Turning to Elena, who remained seated with Rex at her side, the dog's leash looped loosely around her wrist. "Your report, Sergeant. Why override the chain?" Elena's posture was textbook, shoulders back, hands clasped, but her fingers tightened imperceptibly on the leash. Rex's indication was positive for threat, sir. Protocol 7 Alpha, verify K9 alerts in urban structures. The basement yielded no ordnance, but confirmed 3 non-combatants in distress. Humanitarian imperative under ROE Section 4. The room stirred subtly. Major Ellis leaned forward, pen scratching. ROE allows discretion, but not unilateral action. Witnesses, locals, and your team saw the exchange. This could be spun as insubordination. Torres and Kim, standing against the wall, exchanged glances. Torres shifted his weight, boots scuffing the linoleum, while Kim kept her expression neutral, her medic's kit still dusted with basement grit. Outside, the base stirred with evening routine, generators rumbling, patrols changing shifts, the distant bark of other K9s echoing across the wire. Hale steepled his fingers, consulting the intel feed. "Villagers are talking. Our liaison reports the elder, Ahmed Khan, praised the dog warrior to a reporter embedded with the aid convoy. Photos are circulating. You emerging with the kids, Sergeant. Al Jazeera picked it up an hour ago." Elena's stomach tightened, but she kept her voice level. "Understood, sir. My intent was mission security. Unsecured civilians risked escalation." Reed interjected, his tone clipped. It compromised operational tempo. If Taliban scouts were watching, that delay painted a target. The colonel held up a hand, silencing the room. The air conditioner hummed, circulating the faint scent of gun oil and instant coffee. Hale's eyes, sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses, assessed Elena. "You've got a clean record, Vasquez. Bronze Star, commendations for detection work. But this tests the line between initiative and defiance. JAG will review. Expect a formal inquiry tomorrow." Dismissed. As the team filed out, the weight of scrutiny settled like the evening chill. Elena led Rex to the kennel block, a row of chain-link runs under floodlights where the other dogs paced or slept. She filled his bowl with kibble, the dry pellets rattling, and ran a hand along his flank, feeling the steady rise and fall of his ribs. "Good boy," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the base's nocturnal symphony. Humvees idling, laughter from the mess tent, a muezzin's call filtering from beyond the perimeter. In her hooch, a cramped plywood partition with a cot and footlocker, Elena reviewed her logbook by the light of a tactical lamp. Entries chronicled their partnership. First alert in training, a buried simulant under mock rubble. The Helmand clearance, Rex's nose threading through minefields like a divining rod. Loyalty wasn't blind. It was earned in the quiet trust of commands followed without question. But tonight, that trust extended upward, fractured by the basement's shadows. Dawn brought the inquiry to the conference room, a sterile space with metal chairs and a projector humming softly. Major Ellis led, flanked by Hale and a staff sergeant from Internal Affairs. Reed testified first, his words precise. "I issued a direct order to fall in. The alert was noted but unverified per timeline constraints." Torres followed, his voice steady but eyes downcast. "Rex was locked on, sir. I've seen him save lives before." Kim's account was factual, clinical, vitals of the children, no injuries beyond bruises, dehydration addressed en route. Then Elena, under oath, her uniform pressed, Rex waiting outside with a handler. She detailed the sensory cues, the whine, the paw, the metallic tang in the air, and the moment of decision. Conscience aligned with protocol, Major. Leaving them risked more than delay. It risked the mission's integrity. Ellis probed, "And the media exposure. You knew villagers had phones." "No, sir. Focus was extraction." But the images were already viral. Grainy shots of Rex at the entrance, Elena carrying the girl, captioned with tales of American valor amid the chaos. Back home, it trended on military forums, whispers of a K9 hero challenging the brass. By midday, Hale reconvened privately with Reed and Eleanor in his office, the door closed against the base's bustle. Maps of future ops lay spread on the desk, a reminder of the larger machine. "This isn't just about Kalat," Hale said, his tone paternal yet firm. "It's about the chain. Your actions saved lives, Sergeant, but they exposed cracks. Battalions issuing a memo, enhanced K9 protocols for hidden structures. Your input." Elena's surprise flickered, quickly schooled. "Yes, sir." Reed met her eyes, a nod passing between them. Grudging respect, the first mend in the rift. Outside, Rex greeted her with a tail wag, his wet nose bumping her hand, oblivious to the human intricacies but sensing the shift. As the sun dipped toward the Hindu Kush, Elena walked the perimeter with Rex, the leash a tether in the gathering dusk. The base's lights winked on, casting long shadows over sandbags and razor wire. Word had spread through the ranks, quiet conversations in the DFAC, salutes held a beat longer. Her defiance hadn't shattered the system, it had nudged it. A ripple toward reform, where loyalty to life outweighed the rigidity of orders. Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far stories of courage and integrity can reach. The inquiry room at FOB Salerno felt smaller under the midday glare filtering through reinforced windows, the air thick with the scent of stale coffee and printer ink. Major Ellis paced slowly before the projector screen, where frozen images from the villagers' phones played out in stark pixels. Elena emerging from the church basement, the girl in her arms, Rex bounding at her heels like a shadow guardian. The captions in English subtitles read, "American Soldier Saves Hidden Children," a narrative spun from dust and desperation into something far-reaching. Colonel Hale sat at the table's head, his fingers drumming a measured rhythm on the laminate surface, while Captain Reed stood rigidly nearby, his eyes fixed on a point beyond the wall. Elena faced the panel from a metal chair, her uniform still carrying faint traces of Kalat's earth, Rex absent, but his presence felt in the leash coiled at her feet. Staff Sergeant Ramirez from Internal Affairs flipped through a stack of statements, the pages rustling like dry leaves in the base's constant wind. "Major Ellis," Hale began, his voice cutting through the hum of the air unit, "lay out the chain of events for the record. This isn't just a field deviation, it's gone public." Ellis nodded, clicking to the next slide, a timeline graph spiking at the moment of Elena's entry. "Sergeant Vasquez, you received a direct order from Captain Reed at 11:04 hours. Fall in and proceed to the well. Instead, you unclipped the K9 and entered an unsecured structure, confirming no ordnance but extracting 3 miners. Witnesses include your team, locals, and now international media. Al Jazeera's report has 200,000 views. US outlets are picking it up as a humanitarian win amid protocol debate." Elena's response was steady, her hands folded in her lap, calluses from leash work rough against her palms. "Sir, the collapse indicated immediate risk. Rex's alert protocol, FM 31917, prioritizes verification. The children were non-combatants under threat. Extraction aligned with Article 15 of the Geneva Conventions, integrated into our ROE." Ramirez leaned in, his pen tapping. "And the override? Captain Reed's authority was clear. This sets a precedent. Handlers deciding mid-mission." Reed shifted, his boots scraping faintly on the tile. "I stand by my order, Sergeant. Timeline was critical. Aid handoff prevented potential unrest, but the outcome..." He trailed off, the words hanging like radio static. Hale's gaze swept the room, landing on Elena. "Outcome saved lives, but it exposed vulnerabilities. Battalions getting heat from higher. JSOC wants a full review on K9 integration in stability ops. Your action, Sergeant, while effective, bypassed the chain. Explain the moral calculus." She met his eyes, the weight of 8 years in uniform pressing down. The drills at Bragg, where obedience was etched into muscle memory. The quiet nights in the field, where Rex's nose bridged the gap between intel and instinct. "Sir, duty includes protecting all assets, including civilians in our AO. Leaving the basement risked a secondary incident, Taliban reprisal on the village for perceived collaboration. Rex didn't alert on explosives, he sensed life in peril. Conscience reinforced the call." The room fell silent, broken only by the distant thump of a Chinook overhead, its rotors vibrating through the walls like a heartbeat. Ellis cleared his throat. "Media angle complicates this. The elder Khan gave an interview. The dog barked truth when men would not listen. And it's framing us as rigid versus compassionate. Public Affairs is drafting a release, but inquiries like this could lead to reprimands or commendations." Outside, the base pulsed with midday routine. Rangers jogging the perimeter track, their cadence calls echoing. Medics restocking kits in the aid station, the clink of vials and gauze. K9 handlers walking their partners under the watchful eyes of floodlights not yet lit. Torres lingered near the door, summoned for clarification, his M4 slung over one shoulder. "Sir," he said when called in, voice low and respectful. "I saw the whole thing. Rex was dead certain. If she'd followed orders, those kids, we might not be talking rescue." Kim followed, her testimony crisp. Post-extract vitals showed dehydration and minor contusions. No long-term issues. The delay didn't compromise security. Perimeter held. Hale dismissed them with a nod, the door clicking shut behind. He turned to Reed. "Captain, your leadership is not in question, but this highlights gaps. Vasquez's initiative worked here, but in a hot zone. We need protocols that empower without fracturing command." Reed's jaw tightened, the lines around his eyes deepening in the harsh light. "Understood, sir. I'll incorporate K9 alerts into pre-mission briefs, mandatory secondary scans for structures." The colonel then addressed Elena directly, his tone shifting from interrogator to mentor. "Sergeant, you've got the makings of more than a handler. This incident sparking discussion at division level, revising FM 3-19. 17 to include handler discretion in humanitarian scenarios. Your logbook, detailed, precise, will inform it. But remember, integrity costs. Expect a letter of reprimand for the record, balanced by a certificate of achievement." Surprise flickered across her face, quickly schooled into neutrality. "Thank you, sir." As the session adjourned, Eleanor stepped into the corridor, the cool air a brief respite from the room's tension. Rex waited in the kennel annex, his tail thumping against the chain link as she approached. She knelt, burying her fingers in his fur, the warmth grounding her amid the institutional machinery grinding forward. The base's public address crackled. "All hands. Formation in 30 for commander's brief." Word rippled through the ranks faster than official channels. In the DFAC that evening, over trays of MRE-heated chili and flatbreads, conversations turned to Kalat. A lieutenant from Intel murmured to his table, "Heard JSOC citing it in a white paper, K9s as force multipliers for soft threats." Younger privates nodded, eyes on Elena as she ate alone with Rex at her feet, the dog's head on his paws, alert to her every shift. Reed approached her table, tray in hand, his posture formal. "Sergeant, about today, solid testimony. The memo on protocols, I'll need your input. Rex, too." A faint smile cracked his reserve, the first bridge across the divide. "Roger, sir," she replied, the words carrying a new weight. Outside, the Hindu Kush loomed purple in the twilight, its peaks silent witnesses to the day's reckonings. The inquiry hadn't broken her. It had forged something sharper, a legacy where a dog's bark echoed into policy, reminding the chain that loyalty flowed both ways, from handler to command and back again. By week's end, the reprimand arrived via encrypted email, a formal document stamped and filed, its language measured. While actions were well-intentioned, adherence to chain of command is paramount. Tucked with it was the certificate, gold-embossed, noting exceptional initiative in humanitarian rescue. Elena folded them into her logbook, beside entries of Rex's alerts, a quiet archive of costs and gains. Battalion briefings incorporated the changes, enhanced scans for basements and ruins. K9 handlers granted observer status in planning cells. Hale addressed the unit at morning colors, the flag snapping in the breeze, ranks formed under the rising sun. "Kalat tested us," he said, voice carrying over the assembly. "It reminded us that missions aren't just cleared sectors, they're lives preserved." Sergeant Vasquez and Rex exemplify that balance. Salutes rippled through the formation, held a fraction longer, eyes lingering on Eleanor and her partner at the flank. Rex sat tall, ears perked, as if understanding the shift. The base hummed on, patrols rolling out, radios crackling with coordinates, but the air felt altered, charged with a subtle reform born from defiance. In the quiet of her hooch that night, Elena reviewed sat imagery of future ops. Rex curled at the cot's edge, his breathing a steady rhythm. The village of Kalat faded into memory, but its lessons lingered. Orders were the spine of the machine, yet conscience was its pulse, ensuring the heartbeat true. Weeks later, the dust of Kalat had long settled, but its echoes reverberated through the corridors of power at Joint Base Lewis McChord, back stateside. Elena Vasquez stood at attention in the brigade headquarters, the polished linoleum reflecting the muted glow of overhead lights, her dress blues crisp with creases sharp as a bayonet. Rex sat beside her, harnessed and still, his presence a quiet testament amid the formality. The room smelled of fresh paint and oiled wood, the kind of scent that marked new beginnings in old institutions. Colonel Hale had flown in from Salerno for the ceremony, his uniform adorned with ribbons earned over decades, a subtle nod to the continuity of service. Flanking him were Major Ellis and a cluster of staff officers, their clipboards at the ready. While Captain Reed observed from the side, his posture relaxed but attentive. The brigade commander, Brigadier General Laura Chen, presided from the podium, her voice steady over the microphone, carrying to the assembled ranks in the adjoining auditorium, handlers, medics, rangers, all drawn by the whispers of change. "Sergeant Vasquez," Chen began, her eyes meeting Elena's across the distance. "Your actions in Kalat exemplify the Army's core values: loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, personal courage. What began as a routine stability operation became a defining moment, not just for your unit, but for how we integrate K9 assets into complex environments." She paused, the projector behind her displaying declassified footage. The church square, Rex's alert, the extraction, edited for clarity, stripped of chaos. The general continued, her words measured, echoing the procedural rhythm of after-action reviews. The inquiry revealed procedural gaps in verifying K9 indications under time constraints. As a result, the 75th Ranger Regiment, in coordination with JSOC, has updated Field Manual 319.17. Effective immediately, handlers are authorized limited discretion for humanitarian verifications in stability ops, with mandatory post-mission reporting. This reform, dubbed the Vasquez Protocol, ensures that instinct and protocol align, preventing oversights that could endanger civilians in our area of operations. Applause rippled through the auditorium, restrained but genuine, boots shifting on the floor, salutes held firm. Elena accepted the commendation plaque with a crisp, "Thank you, ma'am," her hand steady despite the weight of eyes upon her. Torres in the front row, nodding approval, Kim beside him, her medic's pin glinting. Reed stepped forward afterward, extending a hand in the anteroom, the handshake firm, the rift mended in silence. "You pushed the envelope, Sergeant. Good call. My team's briefing it into every op plan." The changes cascaded outward like ripples from a stone in still water. At Fort Bragg, K9 training cycles incorporated Kalat scenarios, mock basements rigged with non-lethal simulants, handlers drilling the balance between command and conscience under simulated time pressure. Elena was pulled into mentorship rotations, her logbook dissected in classrooms where young specialists hung on her descriptions, the subtle cues of a dog's alert, the metallic tang of fear in confined spaces, the quiet defiance of following one's read over a radioed denial. One evening, during a session in the kennel annex, a fresh-faced private named Reyes approached, leash in hand, his Belgian Malinois pup straining at the end. "Sergeant, how'd you know when to trust the dog over the order?" The air was thick with the scent of wet fur from a recent hose down, floodlights casting long shadows across the runs. Elena knelt to Rex's level, running a gloved hand along his ears, the dog's eyes half closed in contentment. "You read the whole picture, Private. Rex doesn't bark for show. He's wired for truth. Orders keep us alive. But ignoring a clear signal risks more than a reprimand. It risks souls." Reyes nodded, scribbling notes, the exchange a quiet handover of legacy, one handler to the next. Media attention lingered, tempered by public affairs' careful spin. Articles in Military Times headlined "K9 Handlers Call Saves Lives, Sparks Doctrine Shift," photos of Elena and Rex on base, the church a blurred backdrop. No heroes' parades, just the steady grind of reform, updated ROE briefs at division level, JSOC white papers citing Kalat as a case study in moral tension. Villagers from the village sent a carved wooden token through the liaison, a simple dog motif etched in olive wood, delivered with a note, "The Barker who heard the hidden." Back in the field, during a rotation in Syria, Elena led a sweep through a border town, Rex at her side, the desert wind whispering through chain-link perimeters. The team moved with augmented caution now, secondary scans standard, handlers looped into real-time decisions. When Rex alerted on a derelict school, Reed's voice came clear over comms. "Vasquez, verify at your discretion. We've got time." No hesitation, just the evolution of trust. The chain flexible yet unbroken. In quiet moments, like the dawn patrols where the horizon bled pink over razor wire, Elena reflected on the cost. The reprimand lingered in her file, a scar that tempered promotions, but the certificate shone brighter, a beacon for others navigating the grey. Rex, greying at the muzzle, remained her anchor, his paw tapping her boot during halts, a reminder that loyalty's true measure lay in the unseen bonds between partners, within ranks, across the divides of duty and heart. The institution, rigid as ever in its hierarchies, had bent without breaking, learning that integrity wasn't rebellion, but refinement. Elena Vasquez, once a handler in the shadows, stood now as a symbol, proof that a single bark, heeded against the wind, could reshape the silence of orders into a chorus of conscience. Subscribe for more stories of loyalty, courage, and justice within the ranks. Thank you for watching the case of They Said Leave the Village, but the dog kept barking toward the church basement. See you in the next one.